quirky town of Quahog, where laughter often turns to strife, Meg Griffin's tales unfold a roller coaster of teen life. With dreams crushed and bones broken, she's the family's punching bag. Let's explore 11 episodes where Meg was down bad. Starting off with the episode Barely Legal, where Meg was hit with a teenager's enemy, heartbreak. She was hurt and grew a little obsessive. Mayor Adam West sends Quahog's entire police force on a wild goose chase to Cartagena, Colombia, to search for a character from Romancing the Stone. Joe finds himself buried in work as the only officer left in town. Turns out South America isn't exactly wheelchair friendly. With Joe swamped, Peter and the guys decide they're ready to step up as officers to lend a hand. Meanwhile, Meg storms into the house, distraught and threatening to end it all because she doesn't have a date for her junior prom.
No, I won't! I'm so fat and gross!
Desperate, Brian steps up, reluctantly agreeing to be her date. The night of the prom, he masks his misery by downing drinks. And when Meg's nemesis Connie D'Amico shows up, he lays into her, telling her she peaked at 12 and would be so used up by 19, even her stepdad wouldn't be interested.
No, hang on, Meg.
With Connie put in her place, Brian and Meg share a spontaneous kiss. Brian promptly vomits, blaming the alcohol, not Meg. After prom, Meg misreads the situation and starts thinking of Brian as her boyfriend.
Come on, let's go to the mall.
Obsessed, she begins making bizarre advances. When Brian realizes how intense Meg's crush is, he confides in Lois, who's furious and orders him to set the record straight.
I like your ass.
Brian confronts Meg, telling her he's not interested, but Meg won't take no for an answer.
Oh my God, Brian was right.
She hauls him to a hotel and tries to love his brain out, only for Peter and the guys to intervene just in time. Quagmire offers to help Meg see the light. Instead of making things worse, he has a sincere talk with her, explaining that she doesn't need a boyfriend to enjoy being young. He even gives her a copy of The Missing Piece by Shel Silverstein as a thoughtful guide. Afterward, he heads to his bedroom with two guests, but loses interest when one of them says, "whip," in a way that annoys him. Now that's petty, and it's the kind of thing that I can do. In the episode Dial Meg for Murder, Peter's grand rodeo adventure starts with a twist. He's convinced that roughhousing with Meg and Chris will prep him for the real deal. Of course, when he finally meets the bull, things don't go as smoothly as he'd imagined. But the rodeo drama is just a backdrop for the real story, Meg's bruised journey. Brian stumbles upon a job with Teen People, where he's tasked with writing about an average American teenage girl. And who fits the bill? None other than Meg, who he soon discovers has a secret. She's been visiting an inmate she befriended as a pen pal at the Quahog Adult Correctional Institute. When Brian reveals Meg's prison rendezvous to the family, they shut it down, forbidding her from seeing her prison friend again. But trouble brews when the inmate escapes, heading straight to Meg for help. Peter catches wind of the whole situation and, in typical fashion, calls Joe. The inmate is promptly recaptured, but Meg isn't off the hook. She's sent to prison as an accessory. When she returns, she's no longer the soft-spoken outcast everyone picked on.
Boy, I liked her better when she was more predictable.
She's tough, bitter, and has had enough of being the family's punching bag. Desperate for a fresh start, Meg even decides to rob Goldman's pharmacy to gather some cash to escape Quahog. Just as she's about to go through with it, Brian steps in and they have a heart-to-heart. Meg confesses that she's always felt invisible and unloved. Brian, realizing the depth of her hurt, shows her the article he wrote about her, filled with genuine care and appreciation. Moved by Brian's words, Meg's guard finally breaks, and she's pulled back from the edge. With renewed hope, she reconciles with her family, no longer the same, but ready to give them one last chance. In the midst of a storm, all hell broke loose in the episode Seahorse Seashell Party. When a hurricane traps the Griffins indoors with no TV, boredom quickly sets in. While Brian decides to escape reality by taking some psychedelic mushrooms, Meg, on the other hand, is stuck facing the harsh reality of her family's constant insults.
You're bad, you first.
She opens a can of soda, and Peter snaps at her like she's committed some great crime.
Damn it, Meg, will you stop that? That is so annoying.
Meg has finally had enough. As Peter hums the Indiana Jones theme, Meg fires back, pointing out each family member's flaws. Lois and Chris chime in, but Meg's ready, unloading on Lois, leaving her mom speechless and heartbroken. Meg even warns that once she turns 18, she might not want to stick around this toxic family. The words cut deep, and Lois's face says it all. Then Meg sets her sights on Peter, refusing to let him laugh off his fall.
I like where this is going.
She calls him out on his failures, particularly in raising their kids, and even Stewie raises an eyebrow in defense. For once, Peter's left speechless, stunned that Meg's words actually hit a nerve. He turns to Lois, expecting support, but instead, Lois lashes out, tired of his lack of support. Chris joins in, and suddenly, the whole family is at each other's throat.
I don't know, Brian.
As Peter storms off in tears, with Lois chasing him, and Chris leaves the room, Meg sits back, realizing the chaos her words have caused. In a strange way, it's like she's found a purpose. She's the family's emotional punching bag, the one who absorbs everyone's frustration. Feeling an odd sense of duty, Meg apologizes and lets her family blame her for the whole blow-up. She takes the fall, knowing it somehow makes them feel better. Like the title of this episode, A Fistful of Meg, Meg had her face filled with fists. When Meg's friends warn her about the new kid, Mike, a bully with a mean streak,
Then beat up the knife.
she doesn't take it seriously until she watches him pick on poor Neil Goldman. Later, she accidentally bumps into Mike at lunch, spilling her tray all over him. Furious, Mike challenges her to a fight on Friday, sending Meg into a panic. She's terrified and desperate to escape the showdown, even considering transferring schools or trying to get herself expelled. When she tries to recruit the school's toughest jocks, Mike makes quick work of them, and her own friends ditch her, leaving her feeling completely alone. On the verge of tears, Meg heads to the girls' restroom and surprisingly finds Quagmire there. He overhears her plight and offers to help, revealing he too had a bully in his past. Seeing a bit of himself in Meg, he decides to train her for the big fight. His advice was to channel all her frustration with her family, especially Peter, into fighting Mike. Quagmire even teaches her some unconventional moves, showing her how to turn her own body into a weapon. The dreaded Friday arrives, and Meg steps into the ring, terrified but determined. Mike doesn't hold back, pummeling her, yet she refuses to stay down. Just as he's ready to knock her out, she goes for broke with Quagmire's tactics. She leans in and kisses him, catching him off guard, then disgusts him by popping a zit right in his face. When he tries to finish her off, she takes a final, drastic move, lifting her shirt to shock him. It works. Mike, stunned and grossed out, backs off. With the fight finally over, Meg walks away victorious, feeling a strange blend of pride and exhaustion. Quagmire congratulates her, but in true dark humor, casually mentions she might die next year from septic shock from hot dogs. But for now, Meg feels stronger, like she finally stood up for herself in a world that usually laughs at her pain. Meg was crushed by her crush, who really, you know what, you'll get to find out. Let's just go through the episode, Friends Without Benefits. Meg's got it bad for the new guy at school, Kent. He's popular, he's dreamy, and she's terrified to even talk to him. But after a near-death experience with Mayor West nearly running her over, she decides life's too short. She's going to ask Kent out. To her shock, he says yes! On their date night, Kent shows up and ends up chatting with Chris, making Meg feel like a third wheel in her own date. At the movies, she finally works up the nerve to go in for a kiss.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
Only for Kent to awkwardly reveal that he's actually into Chris. Heartbroken, Meg stumbles home, only to find herself trapped in a long, sad talk with Brian the next morning. Brian, trying to be supportive, suggests maybe Kent's just confused. With fresh determination, Meg vows to fix Kent. At lunch the next day, Meg spots Kent talking to Chris again and jumps in, insisting he's making a huge mistake. Brian shares Meg's heartache with Stewie, but Stewie hilariously misinterprets, thinking Kent's into him instead. Later, when Meg's friends casually suggest Kent really likes Chris, Meg's struck by a wild idea. If Kent could just sleep with Chris and tell her about it, she could have some closure. She's so desperate, she even offers Chris money, but he's horrified and refuses. Out of options, Meg turns to Quagmire for help and gets her hands on some roofies, planning to drug Chris and set up a date between him and Kent.
Chris, I made some Kool-Aid. You want some?
But when Chris leaves a sweet photo of them as kids in her room, Meg has a change of heart and pours the drugged Kool-Aid into a plant instead. Unluckily, the plant gets knocked out and is quickly knocked up by another plant. When Kent finally sneaks into Chris's room, Chris wakes up, horrified by Meg's scheme. Stewie, meanwhile, finds the roofies, passes out, and later complains about poison ivy on his butt. The next day, Brian comforts Meg, reminding her that one day she'll find a guy who deserves her. Few episodes back, Meg had a face full of fist. Now she's got a fistful of a face in the episode Road to Rupert. During a yard sale, Brian accidentally sells Stewie's precious teddy bear, Rupert. When he confesses, Stewie is heartbroken but quickly rallies, determined to find his beloved bear. Meanwhile, Peter's latest stunt, attempting tricks with his new Evel Knievel gloves, lands him in trouble,
Hey, Joe.
Good morning, Peter. I'm here to revoke your driver's license.
crashing multiple cars. Fed up, Joe revokes Peter's license,
I'll show her. I'll just go to another bar.
leaving him stranded at home and driving Lois crazy. She recruits Meg as his personal chauffeur, but Peter and his friend's antics soon push Meg to her limit.
I'm just saying, make it worth our while, you know? You may think that song and dance is
When a rude driver insults her during a minor fender bender, Meg snaps, unleashing her fury. Peter, stunned and impressed, realizes Meg is actually pretty awesome and tells her he thinks she's a wonderful daughter. Though he regains his license later, he secretly considers Meg his best friend, even if he won't admit it in front of the family. Using DNA from the dollar bill Rupert was sold for, Stewie pinpoints the buyer, Stanford Cordray, who lives on the same street, but just as they reach his house, they watch in horror as the last moving truck drives off. With Mayor West's help, they try to stop the truck, but it escapes. Luckily, a fallen box reveals Stanford's new address in Aspen, Colorado. Stewie and Brian hitchhike to Colorado, facing grueling challenges, including crossing a mountain. They manage to rent a helicopter by performing a dance routine with Gene Kelly, but true to Brian's luck, he crashes it into a snowy peak, leaving them to trek on foot. When they finally reach Stanford's luxurious house, Stewie learns that Rupert has been given to Stanford's son. Stewie is furious, but when he notices that Stanford is a skiing champion, he challenges him to a race, betting that he'll win Rupert back. The race is wild, and Stewie looks like he might actually win when he uses rocket boosters on his skis, but his overconfidence gets the best of him, and he slams into a tree, losing the race. According to the deal, Brian is now supposed to stay with the Cordrays. Desperate, Stewie distracts the butler, grabs Rupert, and makes a dramatic escape, stealing a car and speeding home. Meg's a lot of things, but a lover of her own gender? I think not. In the episode Brian Sings and Swings, Meg is feeling hopeful when a girl named Sarah invites her to join an after-school club. It's a chance to finally fit in, and Meg can't contain her excitement. But when she arrives, she's shocked to discover it's the Lesbian Alliance.
that were exactly what I needed to hear, and I was just inspired to get up on that stage.
Instead of panicking, she decides to roll with it, pretending to be a lesbian. For once, she feels accepted and valued, and the other girls treat her like a friend. At home, things take a turn. Lois finds out and confronts Meg, worried about her daughter's new lifestyle.
Oh, come on, Meg. You can stop the charade.
But Meg, desperate to hold on to her newfound acceptance, insists she's truly a part of the group, even trying out a few awkward moves to embrace her lesbian identity. However, as the days go by, Meg realizes that she's just not gay. She finally confesses to Sarah that she can't keep pretending, and she feels like she's let everyone down. Meanwhile, things are not looking good for Brian. After nearly getting run over by Peter, he spirals into a depression, grappling with life and death. His encounter with Frank Sinatra Jr. sparks a change in him. Inspired by Sinatra's carefree attitude, Brian starts singing with him regularly, feeling alive again. But during one show, he leaves Stewie backstage, who, bored and eager for attention, sneaks onto the stage to join the performance. The two of them, along with Sinatra, form a new rat pack. As Brian gets caught up in the spotlight, he loses track of time and neglects Stewie. When Stewie finally finds his way home, he's been through a traumatic experience, having a hungry deer gnaw at his ear. Furious at the chaos he's caused, Brian lashes out at Peter and finds himself spiraling back into his old ways, drinking alone in the gutter. But Stewie reminds Brian that someone cares about him, lifting his spirits for one final performance. Just as they're about to shine, Mia Farrow shows up to disrupt their act. Meanwhile, Meg's adventure with the Lesbian Alliance ends with her feeling more lost than ever, realizing that the acceptance she craved came with its own complications. In the episode Steroids, at a lively backyard party at the Swansons, Meg's day takes a wild turn when she learns about the chaos between Stewie and Joe's baby daughter, Susie.
I heard you talking in the hall the other day about how much you liked High School Musical too.
Watching her baby brother get beaten up by a girl brings back Meg's own painful memories of being bullied and overlooked. As the party buzzes around them, Peter's embarrassment for Stewie's loss leads him to the Quahog boxing gym, hoping to toughen up his son. With Stewie's confidence at an all-time low, Peter thinks a little manly training is the solution. One instructor, mistaking their desperation, gives Peter steroids to pump up Stewie. Suddenly, Stewie transforms into a muscular powerhouse, reveling in his newfound strength. He struts around the house, bossing Brian around like a mini tyrant, finally feeling the power he always craved. But this high doesn't last long. As the steroids wear off, Stewie's muscles deflate, leaving him with loose, flabby skin that he desperately tries to hide. Meanwhile, Meg watches the drama unfold with Chris and Connie D'Amico,
Okay, Meg, remember our deal. I do this for you.
the queen bee of their school. Connie's been on a dating spree, but when she takes an interest in Chris, it's not for love. It's a plot to make him popular before breaking his heart. However, Chris surprises everyone by actually falling for Connie, a first for her. Their relationship seems promising until Chris lets popularity go to his head, and soon he's cheating on Connie, making her feel lower than ever. Feeling hurt and left out, Meg teams up with Connie, who's been excluded from Chris's party. Together, they decide to take revenge. They expose Chris's embarrassing dance video, which turns him from a high school hero into a laughingstock overnight. As Chris's popularity crumbles, he realizes how wrong he was and tries to make amends. In a heartfelt moment, he describes to Meg how amazing it felt to be popular, hoping to find common ground with her and maybe repair their friendship. But for Meg, it's a bittersweet reminder of how easily things can change and how hard it is to find her place. Meg is neglected once more and treated like a piece of garbage again in the episode Peter Daughter. Heavy rainstorm clouds roll into Quahog, and before anyone knows it, a flash flood engulfs the Griffin household. Water spills into the ground floor, leaving chaos in its wake. Amidst the panic,
I mean, she's my only daughter, and I feel like I've never treated her as well as I shoulda.
Peter sends Meg into the submerged kitchen to grab a case of beer and a sandwich, oblivious to the dangers. Meg braces herself, diving underwater to fetch the food, but her blouse snags on a fridge rack, trapping her.
Not so fast, y'all.
With panic coursing through her veins, Meg struggles to breathe. Just as darkness begins to close in, Peter bursts in and pulls her to safety, but it's too late. She's unconscious. At the hospital, the mood is somber. The family learns Meg has slipped into a coma. Peter's heart weighs heavy with guilt as he recalls all the times he treated Meg poorly. He vows to make things right if she wakes up. When Meg finally opens her eyes, Peter showers her with kindness, promising to make her happy. But when she mentions wanting to date Michael, a charming med student, Peter's protective instincts kick in, and he becomes suspicious. Lois suggests Peter get to know Michael instead of pushing him away, so he reluctantly agrees. But even after that, Peter can't shake his doubts and decides to spy on their date. Michael feels the pressure and, feeling uncomfortable, considers breaking things off with Meg, which devastates her. The family is in for another shock when Meg announces she's pregnant. Terrified, Peter plans to force Michael into marriage with a shotgun. At Michael's house, the two agree to wed, but during the ceremony, Meg confides in Lois that she's just gotten her period and isn't actually pregnant at all. After breaking the news, Michael bolts and Meg feels crushed. Meanwhile, Peter apologizes for the mess, realizing he needs to support her better. Stewie and Brian attempt to flip a house wrecked by the floods, but their plans collapse along with the house itself. After a failed renovation, they contemplate a dramatic exit involving gasoline and fire, leading to a chaotic explosion and the realization of loss. When Meg gathers her courage to ask Craig Hoffman out on a date. In the episode Don't Make Me Over, her heart races with excitement, but that thrill quickly turns to despair when he flat out rejects her, leaving her feeling crushed and humiliated. Searching for comfort, she turns to her family, hoping they can help lift her spirits. Sensing her sadness, Lois takes her on a spontaneous trip to the mall, where the fabulous Trisha Takanawa is offering free makeovers. This chance could be just what Meg needs. As Meg sits in the makeover chair, she feels nervous but hopeful. When the transformation is complete, she hardly recognizes herself. With her new look, she becomes the center of attention, and suddenly, everyone wants to be her friend. It feels like a dream come true. But as her popularity rises, so do the complications. Meg's family notices the changes in her attitude and feels sidelined by her newfound stardom. Meanwhile, Peter and his friends at the Drunken Clam are facing their own disaster. With a mall stealing their customers, they drag out an old karaoke machine and decide to put on a show. Their rendition of Don't Stop Believin' attracts a crowd, and they see this as their ticket to fame. They even form a band, Fat, Black, and Joe, and book a gig at a local prison. However, their excitement quickly turns to chaos when they realize they don't know any songs, causing the prisoners to riot. The Griffins, determined to support Peter, jump on stage and sing. Meg's fame continues to skyrocket, but her new image catches the eye of Jimmy Fallon, leading to a wild encounter that she mistakenly believes is a private moment. When Peter finds out, he goes berserk on live television, defending Meg's honor.
Who do you think you are, Carol Burnett?
Back home, Meg looks in the mirror and sighs, saying, being beautiful is too much work. She decides to return to her old self, realizing that true happiness doesn't come from looks or fame.
I'm so glad to be the real me again.
In the end, Meg learns a valuable lesson about self-acceptance and what really matters, being herself. In the episode The Perfect Castaway, Peter's fishing troubles leave the Griffin family hungry, so he fires his 2 Portuguese employees, Santos and Pascual. Desperate for a solution, he heads to Pelican's Reef, dragged along by his buddies Glenn Quagmire, Joe Swanson, and Cleveland Brown, who are more interested in free beer than fishing. They manage to catch a boatload of fish, but are soon caught in a hurricane, leaving them adrift at sea. Stranded and starving, Peter hilariously resorts to eating Joe's unused legs. Talk about a fishy situation. Back home, Meg feels the sting of her father's absence. The family holds a memorial service,
Screw you, fish!
where she watches Brian step in to support them. This awkward twist makes Meg feel even more isolated, especially as she sees her mom Lois marry Brian. She can't believe the man who used to be her dog is now her stepdad. Months pass, and Meg's frustration boils over as she navigates this new family dynamic, craving her dad's goofy presence. Meanwhile, Peter, Quagmire, Joe, and Cleveland finally get rescued after being spotted by a passing cruise ship. They had resorted to some outrageous antics to pass the time, but their reunion is anything but smooth. When Peter returns home, he's hit with the shocking news. Lois has married Brian. Heartbroken and feeling left out, Meg watches as Peter storms out, heading to a hotel in downtown Quahog. Desperate to win back Lois, Peter makes a bold move and shows up at the house. Meg can't help but feel torn as she witnesses her parents' messy love life unfold, especially when Stewie walks in on them and captures the moment on video. This only adds fuel to the fire when Lois dashes out with a saddle, making Brian suspicious about her fidelity. Ultimately, the family dynamics shift dramatically, leaving Meg in the middle of the chaos. With Brian heartbroken and Lois torn between 2 men, Meg wishes for a normal family life again.
Huh? You want your ball? You want your ball?
No, Lois, I don't want the ball right now.
She wonders, feeling lost in the storm of her parents' ridiculous antics. As everything settles, Meg is left hoping for peace, even if it's just a moment of quiet at the dinner table.